In the world of pro wrestling, there are only a few wrestlers who could polarize an entire fan base. Only a few wrestlers who are phenomenal on the mic, and even better in the ring. One of those wrestlers are CM Punk. The Second City Saint, the voice of the voiceless, the best in the world. But before being best in the world, before being multiple-time world champion and having rivalries with people like John Cena, Randy Orton, Rey Mysterio, and a dozen more, CM Punk was shockingly on WWE's worst brand, ECW. Before joining the ECW roster in 2006, Punk was known, and still is pretty known today, as an indie wrestling legend. For those that don't know, indie wrestling is anything not named WWE, AEW, or TNA. In better terms, these are the shows that you see ran in high school gyms or at like state fairs or something. I know people like to make fun of indie wrestling and joke about the pay and say things like, bro did all that for a corn dog. But it's a place all wrestlers start. Yes, even though one's in WWE. For Punk, it didn't matter if the show had 40 people or 500 people. He was performing and putting on a banger every time. Which is why after having a stint in Ring of Honor, having legit all-time classics with people like Samoa Joe, Austin Aries, Chris Hero, and Bryan Danielson, Punk was scouted and signed to WWE's developmental, OVW. The same developmental that trained and had stars like John Cena, Randy Orton, and Batista. In OVW, Punk was pretty much instantly made a big deal, as besides losing only 2 matches, Punk won the OVW TV title in less than 2 minutes. Punk a few months later would also win the World Heavyweight title after dropping the TV title. Punk in OVW showcased his veteran-like wrestling and showed how great he was on the mic, which is why after almost exactly a year, CM Punk was finally in ECW, where he did phenomenal. Punk's debut match was a squash match where he won pretty quickly against ECW original Just Incredible. After a few more squashes involving the likes of Shannon Moore and Stevie Richards, Punk would qualify for both a Survivor Series elimination match and an Extreme Rules elimination chamber match. And in my honest opinion, both matches were bangers. I've seen both matches were rated pretty low, and I have no idea why. The Survivor Series match was hella fun and gave us this moment, and the Elimination Chamber match was even more fun. I mean, just look at these spots. Unfortunately though, Punk didn't win, but that was alright, cause Punk was gonna have plenty of time to shine. After making his debut, then losing in the Elimination Chamber, Punk would enter pretty much his first feud in ECW. It was short, but it was with Hardcore Holly. And believe it or not, Holly would actually be the first person to pin Punk and end his undefeated streak. Punk would get his win back, but a scrub and lifelong bench player like Hardcore Holly beating Punk out of all people is outrageous. With being on ECW for a few months and becoming pretty popular, Punk would start to appear on both Raw and SmackDown as well, which led to Punk qualifying for the Money in the Bank ladder match at Wrestlemania 23. And fun fact, at Mania 22, the year prior, Punk was used as an extra for John Cena's Mafia-inspired entrance. At Mania 23, Punk would lose in what was an all-timer Money in the Bank, but he most definitely made his presence felt. Meanwhile, Punk was putting folks to sleep and doing his thing. Somebody else was doing pretty much the same thing, and maybe even better. Elijah Burke, who was also in OVW, was basically running ECW in 2007 and looked like a future star. I mean, he was literally introduced by Mr. McMahon himself, who claimed he was the future of ECW. Burke would soon establish himself as the top heel of ECW and eventually got his own group, the New Breed. And after pretty much burying the ECW originals, Elijah would set his sights on CM Punk, looking to recruit him and create a super team. I'm talking 2017 Warriors. And Punk, to the shock of all, would pull a KD and join. But that didn't last long at all. 2 weeks later, after joining, Punk would cost him a match and officially left the group. And after beating Burke, Punk would finally look to win some gold, the ECW title. Speaking of ECW title, ECW would end up without a champion after Bobby Lashley got drafted to Raw. So they held a tournament for the vacant title. And after 2 decent matches, the finals would be set. CM Punk vs Chris Benoit, which would have been a banger, but unfortunately, we all know what happened instead. As a substitute, we ended up getting Punk vs John Morrison, who in a pretty bad match, not even gonna lie, won. And on the next episode of ECW, Punk would become the #1 contender, which meant these two weren't done just yet. And Punk would low-key lose hella times to Morrison throughout this little feud, as bro lost 2 matches on pay-per-view. So bad to the point he was given a title shot, but with the terms, if he lost, he couldn't challenge for the title ever again. And after an actual great match that's worth checking out, Punk finally defeated Morrison to become the new ECW World Champion. Punk as World Champion, not even gonna cap, wasn't as good as some think or like to remember. And it wasn't really his fault either. The ECW roster by this point was pretty run down and starting to truly resemble what people feared the ECW reboot would be. His first defense was pretty decent since it was revisiting the history he had with Elijah Burke, but the rest weren't good at all. I'm talking Big Daddy V and The Miz before 2016 bad. And what makes things worse is that his reign wasn't long to begin with, as he lost the title 3 months after winning to, drumroll, Chavo Guerrero. Although I'm making this sound kinda bad, it really wasn't, to be honest, as afterwards, Punk would get called up to Raw and was instantly slotted into the main event, even winning the Money in the Bank at Wrestlemania 24, which led to him winning the World Heavyweight title. In my opinion, Punk in ECW was pretty good and definitely elevated the brand in certain aspects, and it also gave him his first opportunity to stand out in the WWE, which we all know he capitalized on big time. If you enjoyed this video, just let me know down in the comments, like this video, and subscribe. Most of you guys watching are not subscribed, and I have no idea why, but I'll see you on the next one. Peace.